Welcome again. This is Brother G coming to you again with another video message, another video teaching the truth about being born again. Now, as we get into this topic, the truth about being born again, there is something very simple about this thing that I have not realized being born again. That there is an initial birth. There is an initial birth from all creatures around the world. There's an initial birth. But there comes a second birth, whether directly or indirectly. Directly meaning you are taught by your parents. That's directly. Your parents is teaching you. That meaning you are being born again. You are born into the world. Meaning when your first birth that you came out your mother womb or canal, that's the first birth. The second birth is the spiritual birth. Not only your parent you are taught by, you're taught by the world. You're taught by your environment. You're taught by your community. You're taught by your teachers. You're taught by school. You're taught by church. You're taught by your environment. You're like a fish in the sea, and the sea represents all the environment and things that are around you. Everything that's included. You're taught by these also. The other thing I want to add before we get into this teaching about the truth about being born again is this quote, and I learned this quote from listening to a famous prophet who passed away. If we take a text out of context, it will become a pretext. And I see that we do this all the time. We all do even this. Before social media, we all do this. We hear a message from someone or we hear a story and we kind of truncate it to fit our belief or our bias. We don't tell the message in the same way it was given to us. We truncate it, we flip it, we turn it all just to bring. And now with the advancement of technology, many people do it. You see it all the time. People post clips of other people and post it out of context and rewrite the whole message that the person. So basically, we've been doing this. I just say we, some of us, we have been doing this from the longest. Books do it. Books write quotes that is not so. They change it. They change the whole. They spin it into anything that they want. There's no wonder they do the same thing with the Bible too. They do it with everything. So we're going to get into this. And this is such a profound phrase. To take a text out of context and to make it a pretext, it becomes void. It becomes invalid. It becomes confusion. It becomes a lie. It becomes convoluted. It becomes, where's the message? It is washed away. Anyways, so let's get into the truth about being born again. Well, the first time I have ever heard about being born again is John 3, when Jesus was talking to Nicodemus and telling him that he must be born again. And Nicodemus said he has to go back into his mother's womb and be born again. And Jesus said, hey, you are a master or a teacher of Israel or whatever, and you don't know this basic principle? Again, many people know this. Many nations already knew this. They knew this concept of being born again, meaning the initial birth, the initial birthing stage when you come out of your mother and you're a baby and you don't have no sense, as we would say in Jamaica. You don't have no sense. You don't know right from wrong. You don't know nothing. That's the first birth. This is clear. The second birth is the spiritual birth. This is where water baptism is a symbol of being baptized in the world and the world system and the world knowledge and the world message and you have to go navigate it. That's basically what it means. That's basically what it means. So when he said, marvel not that I said unto you, he must be born again. This is the first time we that's coming into the world ever hear about being born again. We would even talk like Nicodemus and say, what the hell is this guy talking about? But initially, there's a first birth. There's a first baby birth. Everybody have the first baby birth. And some of us, or a lot of us, have the second birth, some to a greater extent, some to not so greater extent, which is a spiritual birth. That's basic. Everybody should we understand this. So this is the actual two birth. Also, the birth is either directly, you are directly taught, or the spiritual birth, the spiritual birth is you can be directly taught, or the spiritual birth be indirectly taught. You're being taught either way. So I'm not gonna be posting all of the scriptures, because when you go through John 3 and you look at it, says the wind blow and the wind blow it, and this is just let me say, this is just so sophistry. Most of this I believe is just sophistry. The wind blow it. The wind cannot blow if somebody doesn't teach. Somebody have to teach directly or indirectly, which is your environment. So when they talk about the wind blow it, the wind, that is amorphous, or it might be a sign. So it's basically a sign for somebody teaching you directly, or a sign for being taught indirectly. That's basically what it is. Let's so move basically from there. Not just taking out John 3 by itself and then using wind and illusion to create this convoluted, confusing idea of being born again, but to actually read the whole text, read the whole book of John and read Matthew and Luke, and you would realize that it was a teaching. Jesus was going through cities and actually teaching people. So then basically he was likened unto the wind. The wind blow it, meaning he was directly teaching the people. Basically, that's what it means. He was moving from city to city, town to town, just like the prophets, just like teachers, just like whatever. They go from city to city, town to town, and even the devil do the same thing. It said so in the gospels that the prophet, they go by land, sea, now we have air and everywhere, and they teach. People do that. People fly all over the place and teach. They are the wind. That's basically what it means. So if we take John 3 out of its context and try to create a different story, it become a pretext and it become void. But when you look at the whole story, Jesus, then after a while, then it was the apostles. They were the wind. They were the people going all over the place and preaching and teaching. They were the message carrier. They were the postman. They carried a letter. That's basic. A wind don't just blow and you understand things by osmosis. You learn it by experience, whether you know it indirectly or whether you know it directly. That's basically what this is. Let's go on to what the Proverbs say. Let's go, because it was here. The context was the people were lost, so they needed to be born again. This is the context of the whole New Testament to the people. They had the initial birth, but they became dead, and the wind now is blowing, which is messengers, teachers, preachers, evangelists. Now they are the wind. They are going around and teaching people the truth of the kingdom. Basically, that's it. Let's go to the Proverbs. It says, they paraphrase it and they transliterate it and they translate it to a modern time. It says, teach the children how they should live, and they will remember it all their life. This is important in this Proverbs. If we take a text out of context, it becomes a pretext and it becomes void, because it's changed into anything that we desire or we are biased into. And so we have went through studies, and I've heard other people talk about this particular verse in the Proverbs that train up the child in the way he should grow, and they turn it to anything that they want. They turn this particular verse in the Proverbs to anything that they want, and it becomes convoluted to the point of being void, meaning it becomes useless. But when you go to the Proverbs and you look at the context, just like the New Testament that I use the context with being born again, and you use the wind, you're looking at the context of what is written or what is given or what the Nicene Creed change and put it into their form. That's what's given. If we read the context, at least we understand how it was given and how it should be interpreted and how we can extrapolate its message for us today. That's basic. But everybody changed the text. So just like the Proverbs and just like the New Testament, all of it is taken out of its context and it becomes a lie because it's changed. So we cannot extrapolate and get the right message. Again, so let's go to the Proverbs. Many people say this train up mean train them up into be an astronaut, train them up to be a mechanic, train them up to be a teacher, train. That's what everybody extrapolate or interpret it to mean, but it wasn't talking about none of that. And we're gonna see the context. Here's the context of training up the child. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. So this is the Proverbs. This is training up the child that to say a good name is better than that. It didn't say contextually. So you're not supposed to get riches. That's not what it's saying. It's saying when it's compared, a good name is better than that. So that means that we all know, man, that we need money. We need riches to some degree. We all know this, man. So basically, the context is a good name. If you had to choose between a good name and riches, he's saying choose a good name. This is training up the child to have a good name. In its context, it wasn't talking about basketball, which it wasn't talking about you be a race car driver. It wasn't talking about anything like that. It was training up the spirit of the child, the understanding of the child, the concept of the child before those things comes into play. That's the context of the Proverbs and also the context of the New Testament. When you look at the context, it was like training them up in the second birth. The first birth is the natural birth, and the second birth is the spiritual birth, where we are all taught directly or indirectly. I prefer directly being taught, but sometimes circumstances, issues. Anyways, so this is training up the child. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. I'm not going to go through everything, but this is the context of training up the child. You train them up spiritually from after birth. After the natural birth, you start training them up. Let's go to the next verse. The next verse. It says, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. So basically, you're training up the child to be prudent. And so the child that becomes prudent can foresee a destruction or a fall or a problem, and so therefore he escape it because this is what the end will be of that thing. So this is training up the child to become prudent, and so him can hide himself and to escape evil that is coming, or destruction, or even a way that he have chosen and it might be destructive. Not going to get deeper into it, but in the context of training up the child, that's what we're going to get in. The truth about being born again. So when even the context of this Proverbs, as they gave to us, are forced upon us, it was the king of Israel was teaching the people. He was teaching the people through Proverbs. I don't want to get too deep into this. The context of training up the child is to train them up spiritually to become prudent, to train them up. And let's read some more verses. This is the context. Not anything, not basketball, not race car driver, not to be anything. It's to train them up to be spiritually discerning. That's basically what it is. Really, the king of Israel, or Solomon, as they say, and his wise men and all of that, they were the wind described in John. They are the wind described in John. They are the new spiritual birth, those that came before who are with understanding, knowledge, and wisdom. They came with the birth. They are the wind. And so that's the second birth. The first birth is the natural birth. Everybody born naturally into the world. And then after a while, we become spiritual, meaning we start understand spiritual things, some to destruction, some to betterment. That's just basic. So the king of Israel is the wind. Let's keep going. The next verse is very contentious. Amongst the people who are still ignorant. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. The rod, people who are ignorant believe the rod. They believe it. They believe the rod is actually a big stick or a whip or a belt or something like that to beat the child. Beat them into submission. And how is that going so far? Have it worked? They beat them, but they can't get the result because they don't have the understanding. This rod, in context of the Proverbs, the context is to teach consistently, forcefully, suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of. Suffer meaning in this context, some say allow the children in that context mean allow them. But I suspect it depends on where the child is to suffer. The suffer, I don't think mean allow. The suffer mean exactly what it is. Meaning to keep away from, strict them, keep. I think the suffer don't mean allow. But anyways, let's keep this. Many use this rod to beat the child. And how is this working so far? It hasn't proven to be right because it's not in the context. It simply means as when the child is born, you start from the beginning. You start the second birth from the beginning before the force of his environment takes hold on the child. Many child, the force of the environment takes hold of them, especially the bad part, and then we resort into the actual whip, the actual rod, the actual stick. But the context of this, foolishness is bound up in the heart. What you gonna do? Look at the context. Foolishness is bound up in the heart. What you gonna do? Beat the heart till it repent, or teach the heart until it repent? Which one? This is the context. The context clearly said train up the child, and it means early. Train them up spiritually before the force of the world takes over, which is indirectly. The force of the world takes over and it becomes hard, and then you resort to the stick. You resort to the mop. You resort to the wire, the whip. How is that going so far? But it says foolishness is born out in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far. Meaning you have to replace the foolishness with wisdom, being a good name, with being prudent. You want it to get into the heart. That is the rod. There is no shepherd that I know who need, after a certain period, great wool from his sheep, or say a farmer with cows would beat his cows into subjection to get great meat. It doesn't make sense. It's like the psalmist says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He restore. This shepherd don't seem like he's beating me. So the context is the heart. So the whole thing to be born again, as reiterated by the New Testament, is the same thing. The physical birth, everybody get this physical birth, but not many get the full spiritual birth. That therefore some get more, some get 100-fold, some get 50, some get 20, some get 10, some get 0, which we call crazy, idiot, moron. So basically, the truth about being born again is, first, everybody born physically, and literally everybody is born spiritually. Some 5, some 10%, some 60, some really, really wise. But basically, that is the truth about being born again, using the text and its context. And so we can extrapolate the meaning from it and move on in our future. So in this short teaching of training up the child in the way he should go, it's really talking about not playing baseball, not being a... So the truth about being born again is basically after your first birth. Your first birth is when you come out of your mother. Physically, naturally, that's the first birth. The second birth is, everybody get the second birth, which is a spiritual birth. Some to 10%, some to 5, some to 50, some to 60, some to 80, some to 90, whatever we call it, some to 100. That's the spiritual birth, meaning them bring forth fruit in this concept. Keep the concept. Them bring forth wisdom. That's basically our lots of wisdom, lots of teaching. That's the fruit. Basically, we attack spiritually. And over time, it manifests, or it moves from the spiritual to the natural as you build it, as you make it, as you created it. So I don't want to get too more deep in it. So the truth about being born again is basically that it will never change. That's just it. Whether they try to deceive us or not, that's basically what it is. Everybody received the first birth. You had nothing to do with the first birth. The first birth, we don't have nothing. We don't choose our family lineage. We don't choose. There's nothing you don't choose how you look, even though society, culture teaches us to kind of hate our own self. So the truth about being born again is when you're born of the spirit. You're born basically having understanding of some form of spiritual concept. That's basically what you see. You start learning, just like an animal coming into the world, just like a deer coming into the world. His parents have to teach him, not by sound, by action. So when you see the lion come, you have to run. So the baby start learn that instance, that instinct that he don't have by his mother. He have to learn it. So the mother run, so him run after the mother, so him now know say him for run from the lion in the jungle. So that's basically his second birth. His second birth is learning from his mother how to run from the lion. That's basically the second birth. The first birth he had nothing to do with, but the second birth is important upon him for know when to run from the lion. Because if him don't run from the lion, as the proverb said, he might go get nyam. He might go he's gonna be eaten. And obviously the dear mother didn't beat our fawn. She taught him by action. So basically that's the truth about being born again. It can't change. That's how it's set. That's set in literal stone. It cannot be changed. This is how it's set. So again, the truth about this phrase, as I've learned it, is if you take a verse out of its context, it becomes a pretext, and I'm going to add this to it, and it becomes void. It becomes convoluted. It becomes confusing. And this is what's happening now. All right, I'm just going to keep it at that. I'm not going to go into anything deeper. The truth about being born again. Have you learned something today? Peace.